Today we're diving into something huge, a disconnect that's really reshaping the Muslim world. We're talking about the massive gap between traditional Islamic movements and, well, a generation that speaks a completely different language, the language of the internet. It's a clash of two worlds, and to understand what's happening, you've got to understand this. This quote, right here, it really just says it all. Think about that for a second. Not raised on sermons, but on algorithms and screens. This isn't just about what year you were born. We're talking about two fundamentally different realities, two completely different ways of seeing and shaping the world.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to get to know this new generation. What makes them tick? Then we'll look at how this disconnect even happened in the first place. We'll see it all through their eyes, and then ask the big question, can a bridge even be built? And finally, we'll look at why Gen Z might just hold the key to the entire future.
Okay, first up, a generation coded differently. Before we can even start to understand the gap, we have to understand who's on one side of it. What exactly makes Gen Z in the Arab and Muslim world such a unique and honestly such a powerful force?
What's so fascinating here is that they're basically a bridge generation. They've got one foot in the old world they got from their parents, and the other foot is planted firmly in the new digital world that they are building as we speak. This means they just operate on a different wavelength. Everything is about speed, open access to information, and, a healthy dose of skepticism for anyone telling them what to think.
And this really breaks down into four core traits. First, they have digital intelligence. They can navigate a sea of information at lightning speed. Second, they bring a critical mindset to, everything. They question authority by default. They also have a global outlook, connecting with huge issues like climate change and social justice. And maybe most importantly, the old top-down, do-as-I-say methods of control, they just don't work on them at all. All right, section 2, the great disconnect. So if Gen Z is so wired and so aware, how did this chasm get so incredibly wide? The research points to a pretty simple fact, really. While this entire generation was coming of age online, the traditional movements, they were looking somewhere else completely. So here's what happened. For decades, many of these movements were just completely wrapped up in power struggles. Fighting with governments, dealing with their own internal politics. Their focus was totally inward. And during that whole time, an entire generation was growing up completely outside of their world, forming their own ideas, their own values, all online. And this is what you get. Just look at the difference here. On one side, you have Gen Z, laser-focused on these huge, value-driven issues, justice, the climate, basic human rights, freedom. And on the other side, the movements are often focused on the nitty-gritty of governance and internal rules. It's like they're not even speaking the same language. Okay, part 3, through the new generation's eyes. So what does all this actually look like from their perspective? When a young person today looks at these traditional movements, what do they see? Well, it turns out it's a really complicated mix of feelings. What they see is basically a paradox. It's not a simple case of liking or disliking them. It's way more complex than that. On the one hand, there's a genuine respect for the legacy. They see the powerful values their parents' generation stood for, things like community, faith, a deep sense of justice, and they actually admire that foundation.
But right behind that respect comes this wave of sharp disappointment. They look at what happened next, especially after the Arab Spring, and they see a failure to actually deliver on all those big, beautiful promises.
And to top it all off, the whole conversation just feels old. The symbols, the books, the kind of language they use, none of it seems to connect with the really urgent questions Gen Z has about their own lives and their futures, right here and now. So this messy, complicated image really boils down to 4 key things. A hostile global media constantly painting them in a bad light, the very real failures in governance, a message that just feels totally stuck in the past, and, crucially, a complete lack of leaders who can actually speak their language. And this quote, this gets to the absolute heart of the matter. It's so important to get this. They are not rejecting Islamic values. What they're rejecting is the way those values are being used in politics, all while ignoring the things that matter most to them: freedom, justice, and simple human dignity. All right, section 4, how to build a bridge. So you gotta ask, right? With a gap this wide, is a connection even possible? The study suggests that, it is, but it would require a total, radical reinvention of the entire old approach. This table basically lays out the whole roadmap. It's about getting rid of the old top-down lectures and bringing in real dialogue. It means shifting the focus away from pure politics and onto values and justice. It means moving the conversation from just the mosque to the digital spaces where this generation actually lives. And it means changing the medium from only sermons to things like art, culture, and powerful visual stories.
And this brings us to our final and maybe the most important section. The future is theirs. Because the ultimate argument here is that Gen Z isn't some problem that needs to be solved. No, they are the single most powerful force for whatever comes next.
The research actually calls them Gen Z's superpowers, which is pretty cool. They have the power of awareness because they have access to unlimited information. They have the power of pressure, able to mobilize millions of people online in an instant. The power of building, creating real projects that help their communities. And finally, the power of connecting, which is all about turning big ideas into real-world action.
And when you combine all those powers, this generation has the potential to become something really profound, what the study calls a force of civilizational resistance. Basically, a force that can challenge authoritarian regimes and foreign occupation with a totally new, modern, and powerful vision.
And that all leads to this final stark warning. The choice for these traditional movements is actually pretty simple: evolve or become irrelevant. Because if they can't keep pace with this generation, they seriously risk becoming nothing more than relics, just footnotes in a history book.
And so we're left with this question. The potential for something incredible is there, but the challenges are absolutely immense. Whether this critical bridge between the inheritors of the past and the architects of the future can actually be built, well, that's what will define the next chapter for the entire region.